What in the name of horrors is this forbidden technology?
Is it possible to 3D print and paint a giant mech knight to use as a proxy in under 24 hours?
Well, I wanted to find out after getting Elegoo's latest and greatest Saturn 4 Ultra, which claims to be 2 times faster than its predecessor, the Saturn 3 Ultra, with its new tilt-and fat feature. Is it really worth the $430? And if you have an existing printer, is this the upgrade that you need? Elegoo hopes so, but I'm going to put it through its paces, and together we are going to find out. Now, it has to be said that Elegoo have sent me this printer free of charge, no money has changed hands, and they will be watching this video at the same time as you. But before I get into the night and start the timer, I need to set up the printer first. So I took this lovely designed lid that flips up for convenience and ripped it off. Not really, I just unscrewed the hex screws on the side and removed it gently, and I done this because I have to put the printer in its makeshift enclosure because I printed in the shed. But that didn't sound as epic as ripping it off. I've also put this heating band around the fat, which I don't know if this will work because the fat moves, so hopefully it stays on for these tests, otherwise I'll have to use my trusty little fan heater. I'll link to both on Amazon down in the description in case you want them. Now, I use Che 3D text boxes of calibration to get my printers ready, and the great new thing about this machine is that it lets you print 4 calibration tests at once. So this really speeds up the process. Thank you for listening to Feedback Elegoo. Hopefully more companies will follow suit and help make 3D printing easier. I'm using Frozen's 8K Aqua Grey resin as it's my favorite resin to use for getting the most details out of a printer. It's time to slice the plates for the giant knight on sheet 2 box. These files are pre-supported, and today I'm going to print a knight with a lance and a shield because while I like the normal knights, there's just something so cool about this huge hunk of metal jousting down other knights or titans. So using the estimated time from sheet 2 box, this is going to be super tight, and the problem with trying to do this in 24 hours is if I get any failures, I will just automatically fail. But the Saturn 4 Ultra comes with a camera that both captures time lapses, which is great for someone like me, but it also has an AI feature to detect failures, but I don't really know how that works with a plate full of models because, as you can see, you can't see half of the plate, but that's what Elegoo claims. While the first plate is printing, I think it's time we talk about this plate in general because it's a little different than usual. Elegoo says this printer has an automatic bed leveling feature. It does this with every print, which is pretty neat, especially for beginners or people that have struggled with leveling before. Although it should be said that once you level your bed a few times, it's honestly wee buns after that. It's dead easy. The plate comes pre-etched to help with adhesion, which is something that I like about other printers like the Frozen Mighty 8K, which I've used extensively before. But I really think we should address the elephant in the room. This plate looks bizarre. It also looks like resin can just sit in between the plate and these spring things. So there could be some wastage and messiness there, which I'm going to be very honest. With how easy it is to level a bed, this isn't a trade-off that I like. With resin printing, one of your goals has to be to have as little mess as possible. On machines this size, that should be normal. An even bigger machine like the Mega 8KS has a handle for the plate to be tilted to trip resin back into the fat. I will say I was slightly worried with the thermal band impacting the movement of the fat, but it seems to be working just fine. I do wish they had included in a heating element to this printer, but I'll get into that later in the video because Elegoo probably won't like it. But now that the first plate is done, the real race against time begins. I took the models off the plate so I could load up the next one to get it started full of the rest of the model while I chucked them into the wash station full of methylated spirits for 5 minutes before taking the supports off. Next, I used my frozen cure station's fan and cure setting to try the models for 30 minutes before queuing them for 10. I use 10 because these are bigger parts and I want to see if there is any difference with the longer time. I mean, why wouldn't you start experimenting on a time-sensitive project? With the second plate still printing, it's time to start building and painting the pieces that I have. I would normally like to do this with the model fully built and make it easier for your viewing pleasure, but forgive me brothers, the clock is ticking.
I modelled the legs on a base using some torn up corkboard to make the knight look like he's on the search for his next jousting opponent. The glue was just not playing ball and this was a very frustrating 30 or so minutes, but after I started sprinkling baking powder on the glue to activate it, it went a little smoother.
And then I primed the pieces with Vallejo black primer before loading up the airbrush with some Vallejo steel and blasted all of the metal pieces all over. I thought about try brushing, but this is faster, I think, and hopefully this will save me a little time later on. I kept the armor pieces separate from the model because the one thing I hate painting is trim. It always takes me so long to go over it all, so I'm going to undercoat all of the armor pieces with this gold recipe that I picked up from the legendary Finalizing. I tried to cover the top parts of the panels with my thumb to keep some of the black to create an easy gradient for later on, but it might not be as clean as I like. It will be interesting to see, however, how the contrast paints go over the gold, and I really hope that it comes out well. For the panels of the armor that will be red, I used some Bale red contrast paint. It's a bit of a weird red contrast because when it goes into cracks and crevices, it doesn't really have a lot of shade, but these armor pieces are flat, so this won't matter too much. My main concern is how this will dry over the gold, so a second coat might be needed if I have time at the end. We are about 15 or 16 hours into the 24 and I still have to paint all of these new parts after cleaning and curing, which will take in total around 45 to 60 minutes, but it also gives me a break from painting because that was a long session.
I highlighted some parts with copper to break it up from looking too much the same. Some pieces I dabbed it on with a sponge to make it look a bit more interesting, whereas others I just brushed it on.
I repeated the process from earlier with the painting, except once I was done, I realized I had fucked myself from the start. I like to use oil paints to bring everything together by staining my models and adding some much needed contrast. Except for that to happen, they have to dry overnight. So I have two choices. I can thin it right down to just go into the cracks, or I can accept this isn't possible and just take the oils off the next day. I used the AI camera to my advantage and checked on the print from Shitubox. I seen that the other plate was done, so I raced out to the shed to collect my next batch of parts to do. I do have some thoughts to say that might mean I won't be getting another Elegoo printer to review in the future, but it has to be said.
So I've used this printer for 24 hours and I do have some thoughts about it. Some good, some very bad in my opinion. I'll start with the good. It's very fast, like I mean fast. I usually compensate for the lack of temperature and pulling force by lowering my lift speeds on my other printers, but this printer has a fast and slow mode, and I printed this model with fast mode only at 1.2 seconds exposure time. Another good thing is the exposure test that you can do. You can do 4 at a time, but what I found out is if you keep pressing this button, you can do even more per plate, which I didn't realize until it was already done. The only thing is that I don't know if I'm just dumb, but I couldn't really keep track of which one was which when I printed them because of one major negative with this printer, which is this plate. It's so messy and quite honestly has put me off using the printer more. In short, I hate the plate. It's too messy. You only have to level your printer now and then, so having an auto leveling plate but having all the mess just isn't worth it to me. The bib included feels like they realized this is a pain in the ass to use and needed to include in something to help, but now you have to store a flimsy plastic tray that's got resin on it. So the space saving of the flip lid is countered by the bib. The other bad thing is that there is no heater in the printer. Elegoo, if you included a heater integrated in this like the GK2 and charged $100 more, then you really would have been onto something here. If it didn't have that plate. I'm sorry, I just really hate the plate. What I will say though, is with the printer in the enclosure and a light shining onto the printer so that the AI camera could actually capture a time lapse, which by the way, why wasn't a light included in this? Anyway, with the light and the heating band turned right down, the printer read a temperature of 47 degrees Celsius, which is hot as shit. And the printer body itself was hot to touch. So if you have an enclosure and an LED light panel, then you probably won't need to worry about heat. Well, maybe too much heat. I honestly can't say if I'd recommend this printer or not. I've given you the facts based on my experience with the printer, and I don't really think it's my place to say you should or shouldn't get the printer. I'll leave that to the review channels. All I can say is this came so close to replacing one of my other printers because the quality of the prints and the speed is fantastic. It's just the minor gripes I have that are holding me back from replacing one of the others.
Back to the model, I want to keep to the challenge of under 24 hours, so I used some of my black and brown oil wash that I've had in this jar for close to a year that's really thinned down with white spirits. It won't stain the model much, but it will add that contrast that's needed. Now, I did get this idea for this challenge from Eons of Battle, who built and painted an official night in 24 hours, and it was a fun challenge. Would I do it again? Well, that depends if you liked it. So if you did, leave a comment down below saying, I can't believe that happened at the end. And this will appease the YouTube algorithm gods, and hopefully this will get the word of 3D printed minis out to more people.
I do just want to add that I reached out to the creator on Instagram to ask if they were okay with me covering their model, and they agreed. So I'll leave the link in the description down below. And just a reminder, this is a proxy model that can be used for the Titan Lords faction in one-page rules. So please go and support the creator because this is fantastic work.
If you thought that was cool, you should watch this video next because I 3D printed 1,000 models for an epic army project. As always, I want to give a huge thanks to all my Patreons and channel members because without your support, none of this is possible, and I'll see you all in the Discord.